From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode number 457. I am Andrew in our forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek. He is D3 in our forum, and also on Twitter at D3G and D384. Derek, this week we'll be talking about the greatness of Jevon Bro, among other things. But first of all, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well. Yeah, we just had a fun session on College Hoops 2K7 for PlayStation 3. Andrew and I connected on Parsec, and we used Ohio State versus Florida, which was the real matchup for that year. And yeah, it was a blast. And I think that the biggest adjustment was just learning the controls, because I think that game animates very well. I think that it's pretty sound when you do get used to the controls and whatnot. But I thought it was a good session, and I'm glad that we got the win.
And Jevon Bro, I saw that during the intro, the name on the back of his jersey, and that obviously caught my eye straight away.
Yeah, so what we did, when you boot up College Hoops 2K7, it asks you if you want to just generate numbers for the players. Yeah, so for example, like on Ohio State, obviously Greg Oden's the center and he's number 20. So that would be reflected in the game when you just generate numbers. Or we could generate names. So fictional names, kind of like some of the old school college basketball games and whatnot. You know, a way that you could make video game legends and kind of put your own stamp and signature kind of like on the different games. So what we chose was to generate names. And on the end of the bench for our team, Ohio State, was Jevon Bro, which is a really funny generated name. And there was another guy named something like Gary Coffee or something like that.
Coffee,
but,
yeah.
I find it really fascinating, the names that get generated when you do the generate names option.
As you say, we had Moody, who was Oden. What was Noah again on the other side?
No, I can't even remember. I just know that
it's Noah, though. Look at the face. That's Joakim Noah.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously Noah. I mean, he has the ponytail and everything. It's very clear what they were trying to do. They were trying to get as many likenesses in the game as possible without actually giving credit to the likeness by name.
You can see why the Ed O'Bannon suit, you can see why that was successful, quite frankly, when you go back and play these college games, because they didn't try to hide it.
Oh, no, 100%. That game's presentation is fantastic. You got Greg Gumbel doing like the halftime and post-game shows. You have the crowd acting realistically as far as like emotionally, and then also, you know, for team specific, for like the top teams and whatnot, they sound like the real crowds for those teams and whatnot. There's a lot of authenticity and a lot of love that was put into College Hoops 2K7, as well as like College Hoops 2K8.
I think a lot of people overlook College Hoops 2K7 because 2K8 was the last release, a very well-received release. Just one of those games that comes either between two landmark releases or just before a really memorable release. So it gets kind of overlooked.
No, absolutely. And I like that when you play College Hoops 2K7, it feels, like the college game, atmosphere-wise, gameplay-wise, and whatnot, real college team playbooks, as opposed to feeling just like NBA 2K7. I think that there was an obvious attempt to make it as college as possible. Let's put it that way.
One thing that does bug me a little bit about the game, and it's the same criticism I have of 2K7 as well, NBA 2K7 that is, that it has that intro, when you go to the main menu, every single time. In College Hoops 2K7, it's focusing on a desk with some tapes, VHS tapes, those were a thing back in the day, kids, and also the playbooks and everything, and the coach's desk, basically. And it pans to that every single time, and the stomping and the clapping and everything on the desk shaking, the camera shaking, and it focuses on that. With the NBA 2K7, it was a fly through the city. And look, it's a nice presentation and all, but to happen every single time, it does slow things down in the menu. And if you accidentally go into a menu and back out, or back out of a menu accidentally to the main menu or whatever, then you're stuck with that, loading into that, and it just wastes a bit of time. And look, it's a small amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but it's one of those things that's cool the first time, and then you think, okay, I wish I could turn this off.
That happened a couple times, actually, while I was trying to change some of the options, and including removing the whole free throw tilt option and changing it to the shot stick. But I had to keep going back into the menu, and it kept doing that ridiculous, like, long loading screen and whatnot. And it does. It takes a while to get out of that, because the loading times on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 weren't exactly ideal. And even though we were playing the emulated version on the PS3 emulator, that loading time was still pretty slow.
It was. And you also bring up the 6-axis control there on free throws. And this was the whole tilt the controller to simulate the follow-through on a shot, to simulate shooting. And it does have an option to switch to right stick shooting, which we did turn on. But around about that time, Derek, a lot of games, basketball games, were trying to go for those motion controls, I guess because the Wii was very popular at the time, so because they had the motion controls either through the PlayStation Move or the 6-axis tilt control on PlayStation as well, that you can, that it was trying to go for those gimmicky controls. And if you didn't have an official 6-axis controller, I know this because I have the game on PS3 playing on original hardware with a third-party controller, then if you have that on, then you can't shoot free throws. So that is a problem. We turned it to right stick using in the emulator, of course, because we're not using 6-axis controls. But one of those gimmicks that just didn't work out.
When we were playing the College Hoops 2K8 tournament, there was a way, because I downloaded the updated patch for the game, which gave us the shot stick option, the option to switch it and whatnot. But what users that were playing in the tournament were telling me was that in order to play the game without that patch, so without the shot stick option, and still be able to hit free throws, what they would do is they would put real player percentage on and just let the time run out at the line. And when the time runs out at the line, the player automatically shoots the shot.
That's right.
So they'd have to wait. They'd have to wait about 10 seconds on each free throw. Still faster somehow than NBA Live 2000 on free throws.
Yeah.
But they'd wait the whole 10 seconds. The player would shoot the free throw, and it would go by their real player percentage.
I mean, that's a decent workaround, but still not ideal. And again, they were going for those gimmicks at that time. A few years later, the PlayStation Move controls were really big. People may remember the late great Kobe Bryant being involved in the previews of NBA 2K12 at E3, showing off those PlayStation Move controls, and it seemed like that was going to be this big thing moving forward. And of course, that was towards the end of the PS3 and Xbox 360's life cycle, of course. But even so, yeah, it just didn't last. People just want to play a sim game with a gamepad, Derek, and those gimmicks, yeah, they don't add anything to the game. They don't bring that skill gap that everybody wants to talk about. They don't bring the fun, and that's the main thing. They're not fun to use.
Well, if you think about it, the whole Nintendo Wii idea with the controllers and the, what did they call it, the nunchuck controller,
yes.
Like that was gimmicky in itself. Like the whole Nintendo Wii setup, when you really think about it. But the thing is that Nintendo Wii was really popular. And I think that the people who worked on games for other consoles and whatnot, and video game makers in general, caught on to the popularity of the Wii, and how much people liked the different things that they were doing with that system, even though they were gimmicky, and they tried to capitalize on that. And like you said, it's just, it worked well for the Wii and the games that were released for the Wii most of the time, but it's not good for things like basketball games.
Well, exactly. You hit the nail on the head right there, that the games are designed for that control. If the games are not designed specifically for that gimmick, that style of control, which basketball games aren't, unless you specifically design it for that, which, again, NBA 2K wasn't, then it doesn't work out very well. Right.
I mean, you could even call something like the Kinect for Xbox One gimmicky.
Sure.
In a way. I still remember getting a technical foul on NBA 2K14 the first time I plugged in the Kinect, because I swore and the Kinect picked it up and I got hit for a T, which is kind of cool in a way. But the Kinect was popular for a little bit. Like there was some noise about it, some hype about it for a few months and whatnot, and then it just died.
Yeah.
And nobody was talking about it anymore because it was very limited overall, and it didn't have use for things like, NBA games, football games, adventure games, RPGs, and everything like that. So it was really, it could be used for things like maybe like dance games and whatnot, those types of games, but like those are not like the most popular games.
There was NBA Baller Beats, of course. That was a running joke on the podcast about 10 years ago when that came out.
Yeah, I think I actually listened to that episode, to be honest with you. That's one of the ones that I went back and listened to and everything. NBA Ballers, the original NBA Ballers, I just want to point that out, is one of the best street/arcade games ever made. I absolutely love that game. Great graphics, great gameplay, a lot of fun stuff you can do. I'm surprised that there's more people. I'm surprised that there's not more people that, submit highlights for NBA Ballers. I guess it's harder because people are usually playing it off of the original hardware if they are playing it, and they don't have the tech to upload their clips and whatnot. But yeah, I'd love to see some NBA Ballers clips.
Before we get back to College Hoops 2K7, and shout out to Vegan Fit Tea on Instagram, listens to the podcast, very kind comments about the show, and suggested this College Hoops 2K7 discussion, and we were quite keen to revisit that game, having not really talked about it much on the show before. But I do have a bone to pick with you, Derek.
Uh-oh. What happened? What did I do?
I can't believe that you did not accept my wonderful Kobe Bryant highlight in NBA Live 10 for the top 10. I mean, can you think of a better highlight, especially after I put those effects on it too?
So, Andrew, as a gag, submitted a highlight that he said he was super excited about, and it was just Kobe Bryant in the hangar on NBA Live 10. And it's just a couple basic dribbles through through his legs, and then just like a completely like wide open layup. I mean, he's in the hangar, he's in the practice court.
Not even a dunk.
But he had me thinking that he was submitting this excellent, amazing highlight that might even crack like the top 3 and whatnot. But yeah, and then he sent me another one which had like VHS effects, like broken VHS effects to it, and yeah, that was equally horrible. So
it was the same highlight, just 15 frames per second, and also upside down.
Yeah. Speaking of, though, that top 10 this week ended up being really good. You actually sent me an NBA Street highlight captured off of the original PS2 hardware using an HDMI converter. And it was Shaq catching a block in midair, so like a snatch block, off of a 3, outletting it to Kobe. Kobe does a couple fancy dribble moves, couple street moves, like he could do in real life, a little slip and slide in there and whatnot, and then throws it down with one hand. And I mean, I had to put that in the top 5. That is an excellent highlight. It's a great two-way play. NBA Street is still incredibly fun today. It holds up so well. And then I hated putting myself at number 1 this week, Andrew. I hate putting myself that high.
No, you are very particular about that. That you are very hard on yourself, or you set the bar very high for yourself because you do want to spotlight the great highlights from our community. So you're always looking to feature their great highlights before your own. But there was no way that couldn't be number 1.
Yeah, so it was an NBA 2K13 highlight, Michael Jordan and the Bulls versus the Knicks in 91-92, a classic matchup. And I ended up hitting a game winner down 1 in overtime with MJ. A very MJ-like move, like quick crossover, then gets into the paint, does a spinning fadeaway, and that's the game. And it was so Jordan-esque, and it was so perfect that I had to make it number 1.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, me-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
It takes me back to your comment from a couple episodes ago where you stated that a Reddit user said that NBA 2K13 is not a good game, and the only reason why people talk positively about it is because of nostalgia. I think he even said the game was like garbage or trash or something like that. And I got to point something out. I went back and played NBA 2K13, and I played that game. I was playing the URB, but I can play that game vanilla too, just like the default rosters and everything, and it's still a blast. And there are so many things that I like more about NBA 2K13 on the virtual hardwood than 2K23. On 2K13, the foot planning is better. I like the post game better. You can do quick spin moves in the post on NBA 2K13. I like the fadeaways better, the shots on the move better. I think the dunks are often better, even though I really like the dunks in NBA 2K23. There's less suction. There's so many things to like about the gameplay on NBA 2K13, and I've talked about it positively on so many different shows in the past. But revisiting it just made me realize that not only do these past titles often hold up, but they're often better in so many ways than some of the recent 2Ks. And my brother actually was watching that whole game, and he was glued to the TV because it was just a back and forth with that Knicks team. I was playing it on Superstar, and Patrick Ewing was killing me, and Xavier McDaniel had a couple huge dunks in traffic and whatnot, and just the action screamed NBA, like classic NBA and just NBA in general. So yeah, people, listen, it's not just nostalgia. The games, so many of the past titles have excellent mechanics and excellent control.
Well, first of all, I'd like to compliment you on how you played that game. Obviously, getting the win, the exciting buzzer beater there. Much, as I've said in a couple of comments now, much more fun than the real Bulls-Knicks games from the past week. For me, as a Bulls fan, to behold, obviously. But the way you were using MJ, not just driving in and dunking every single time, although that is exciting and fun to do, you were going to the mid-range. You were pulling up the way he did, going to those fadeaways, and just making those MJ plays, playing the passing lanes, making those strips as Xavier McDaniel was going up for the layup. Reminded me much of the real 1992 matchup with them back in the day. And, of course, man, that was 30 years ago. Wow. Anyway, just the way you were playing with MJ, very Jordan-esque. That was great to see. People can check out the full highlights on the NLC YouTube channel. But to the point of the Mr. It's Only Nostalgia on Reddit, I don't think people go back and play these games, Derek, like you and I do, and other people do. They don't go back and see, these mechanics were actually better. This felt a bit better on the sticks. This was more satisfying. I don't have to grind for hours and hours just to have fun with the game. People don't go back and see the benefits of these old games and how they were better. Obviously, there are ways that newer games have improved on certain aspects here and there. We've never denied that. As we went over our NBA 2K23 definitive review a few episodes ago, we do acknowledge the strengths of the modern games. But there are aspects of those old games that do hold up very well. They were very well designed. They were designed at a time when it wasn't based all around the metagaming and everything, as we've talked about before. And people forget that. They don't go back and see. And I think, to some extent, 2K is actually banking on people forgetting about how good some of these games were, so that they can push that narrative that the latest is the best. And you need to get the latest game, and you need to be online, and you need to be buying VC and to get packs and upgrades and everything. So people really feed into that new is always better narrative because they don't go back and see.
Well, I want to make a point. It's not just that these games hold up, and you made a comment that things, there's certain improvements to the modern games, and obviously like things like graphics and whatnot, and certain animations. Yeah, of course, there's going to be some improvements there, but that doesn't make the newer game more mechanically sound or more realistic, and it certainly doesn't make it more fun.
Agreed.
And why are we playing the games? To have fun, right? And we have a lot more fun with NBA 2K13 overall because of the mechanics, because of the control, and because of the love that was put in to the NBA portion of the game. So as far as that Reddit user goes, there's two reasons for that type of comment. One, recency bias. They're saying nostalgia, but really it's recency bias.
Absolutely.
That and inexperience, like you stated, not playing the games, right? Maybe they never played the game. Maybe they haven't played the game in 8, 9, 10 years and whatnot, or longer, depending on the title that we're talking about. So yeah, I think it's ridiculous. Before I played NBA 2K13 and my brother was watching, like I stated, I was playing NBA 2K19. Also, my brother was watching during that. And I put Jordan on the floor against the Knicks in that game using the amazing retro season rosters that Stildo and team are working on over on the NLSC. Just amazing rosters. But NBA 2K19's mechanics, the clunky change of direction, the ridiculous amount of skating, the suction that is in that game and whatnot, and just all the flow interrupters that are in that game, I couldn't do half of what I was doing with Jordan in that 2K13 game on NBA 2K19. And it was just overall a frustrating session trying to do, Jordan-esque stuff. And I also want to point something out too. You had stated that, you appreciated the way I played with Jordan. You know that I've watched endless footage of Michael Jordan. And definitely, I also watched him live with the Bulls and with the Wizards. But I've spent countless hours watching MJ. So I know where he likes to be on the floor. I know where he, likes to attack, how he likes to attack. And I, like Zion, admire how hard he worked on defense. And I say like Zion because Zion said that was one of the things he wanted to be. He wanted to be not as much even Jordan on offense as he wanted to be Jordan defensively. I thought that was cool. Zion's actually one of my favorite players in the NBA. But Jordan's ability to block shots from the shooting guard position, he had 131 in a single season, right? His ability to step in the passing lanes and get steals on the ball and strip people at the rim and all of that stuff, or as they're going up. I mean, he had over 250 steals in a single season. So, putting Jordan on the floor, you feel like you can do anything with him and it won't be unrealistic, right? You can get hot from downtown. You can get hot from the mid-range. You can, dominate somebody in the post. You can dominate people defensively. You can dominate people going to the rim, and it's still all MJ. And that's why it's so fun to use Michael Jordan in video games.
My hot take of the week, Derek, is that MJ was pretty good at basketball.
Yeah. No, really? Is he as good as Javon Bro?
I mean, just from a name standpoint, I do have to give it to Bro. But MJ's a pretty cool moniker as well. But no,
Mr. Bro,
yeah, Mr. Bro,
Mr. Bro.
Just the you can just imagine the roll call there. But it's when you know the game like that, and those games you could play like that. It wasn't about not to belabor a point, but it wasn't about finding those meta builds and stocking up on badges and boosts and everything. It was about knowing the players and playing to their strengths.
Yeah, and shout out to Sco and Slim of the URB team and all the people that worked on the art for the URB rosters.
So authentic.
So authentic and endlessly fun. It's just there's so many seasons to play, just like the UBR. And the art is fantastic with the courts, the Dornas, the jerseys, the crowds, all of that stuff. The action is fun because of the way they did the tendencies and ratings and whatnot. And like I said, I was playing against the 91-92 Knicks there, and Patrick Ewing was absolutely destroying me in true Patrick Ewing fashion. He was hitting mid-range shots on me. He was putting his back to the basket and hitting fadeaways on me. He was throwing it down right under the hoop, and Xavier McDaniel was getting to me in the high post, and he would up fake and then go to the hoop and throw it down in traffic. I'll have to share one of those highlights because he really threw it down on me hard on one play. But you felt like you were really playing the 91-92 New York Knicks. And that's the testament to a great mod, because as you know, if tendencies and attributes and everything are screwed up and you're playing against the computer, they're not going to play anything like their real life counterpart.
And to that point, I know there's some people who've brought up over the years that some of the overall ratings look a bit weird in URB. But as Sco and Slim have pointed out on many occasions, and the gameplay bears this out, that they've assigned the ratings, I should say, to have that authentic experience. And does it mean the overall ratings always look 100% correct? No, but that's not the point. That's why overall ratings are overrated, because they're focused
Right.
on the tendencies. And
Right. See, the
yeah,
thing is if they made it a point to make it so Derrick Rose didn't have inflated defensive ratings just to make his overall higher. Right. Like Derrick Rose is not an all-time defender, but somebody might be inclined, in order to make him a 90 to 94 overall player, like say, the MVP version of Rose, like somebody might be inclined to inflate some of his ratings
start
on the
fudging
defensive
ratings.
end,
Yeah.
or maybe even his rebound ratings or something like that, in order to make his overall higher, to appease people who are downloading the rosters and whatnot. So like, I appreciate their strategy of, you know what, we don't care about what the overall rating is. We are going to make the player according to the way he played in real life, and his strengths and weaknesses in real life. And I think that's a great approach.
And again, the gameplay proves that is an approach worth considering with rosters, because if you don't get the tendencies right, if you don't get their ratings right, they're not going to play like their real-life counterparts, which is the point of of accurate rosters anyway. I actually saw somebody on Twitter mention that there's a Galaxy Opal Shaq in MyTEAM at the moment, I believe, that plays very much like Shaq. He can't dribble like a Kyrie Irving. He can't shoot like a Steph Curry. He plays like Shaq, and you have to use him like Shaq. And I know people say that MyTEAM is a fantasy mode and all that, but to me, the fantasy aspect of MyTEAM is to be able to get all these players together, all these stars from across the breadth of NBA history, and create a fantasy lineup. If all of the players play the same way, if they don't play like their real-life counterparts, put aside realism for a moment, it defeats the purpose of collecting different cards. If it's just about collecting a powerful card, you can put anyone on the front and it doesn't matter.
See, that's why I like my 85 overall Shaq that I have, because you have to use him like Shaq. He doesn't have the crazy dribbling and whatnot. You can't hit threes with him and everything. He is basically he's going to dominate on drop steps. He's going to get double teamed constantly. And you can hit little half hooks with him and everything, but he's not unrealistic. So even though he's only 85 overall, which obviously Shaq should be higher than that, I still like it because I have to use him like Shaq. Speaking of which, as I told you before we started recording, on NBA 2K23, MyTEAM, I ended up picking up an 85 overall Clyde Drexler. I gave him a couple badges to boost him, and an 82 overall Larry Bird. Now, obviously, there shouldn't be an 85 and 82 overall Bird and Drexler. They should be higher for going by the portraits that were used. These are, primed versions of both going by the portraits and whatnot. But I appreciate these lower overall versions of these legends, because if I need to get some buckets from the outside with this 82 overall Larry Bird, his 3-point rating and his post-fade rating and all that stuff is high enough where I can do that type of damage. His passing is high enough where I can thread the needle with him and, help my team from a passing standpoint, and I can still get rebounds with him and whatnot. So even though it's an 82 overall Larry Bird, I feel like I could still put up a triple-double with this version. And then this Drexler version has a silver posterizer. So I can still, posterize people and whatnot, just not as often as if it was gold or higher. And, he has a good shooting rating inside the 3-point line. He's, I think, a D on 3, which is a little low, but I can stomach that and just try to do damage in the mid-range, high post, and then go into the hoop and whatnot. But being able to add Drexler and Bird, even lower overall versions, for super cheap is a big bonus for me. And with no contracts, I don't have to worry about losing them. So I thought that was cool. I think I got Larry Bird off of the auction house for, what was it, 1,900 MyTEAM points.
Wow.
So 1,900.
Yeah, that's a steal.
I mean, he's only 82 overall, but that's a steal for me. And I got Drexler for, I want to say, 4,000. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was cool.
But that again speaks to how or a lot of people are drawn to the overall rating, because they look at that and say, oh, well, that's a useless card. That's not a Galaxy Opal. It's not a 96, 97 overall. It's not a Dark Matter card of 99 overall, etc. But you can still use those cards effectively because they do have some accurate ratings and some very strong ratings that do reflect the strengths of those actual players. So you have to look beyond the overall rating, whether it's My Team, My Career, or franchise modes, Play Now, whatever. Overall ratings, as we've said before, their importance is overinflated.
Yeah, I think that it also is kind of a testament to the way I like to play and how I'm playing the mode in general. So I'm playing My Team Domination. I'm not jumping online and playing a bunch of juiced up teams, right?
Exactly.
I'm playing the computer on Domination, on Semi-Pro, Pro, and All-Star for each team that I'm going against. And I've uploaded a ton of highlight videos to the NLSC YouTube, and I'm going to continue to do that. But what I'm trying to do in My Team Domination, also because I'm sharing the clips, is just use these guys realistically. And this 82 overall Bird, I'm going to be able to hit these outside shots that he hit in real life. I'm going to be able to fade over my defender and hit fadeaways. I'm going to be able to do great passes with him. That is something that is going to look great on the highlight reels, and that's Larry Bird-esque. And Drexler, I'm going to be able to get out on the break, and I'm going to be able to throw it down, and I'm going to try to play with Drexler realistically, and that card's going to allow me to do that. So I think a lot of it depends on how you play the mode and, which parts of the mode that you're playing, because I could care less about playing this mode online.
That reminds me of another comment that I saw on Reddit recently. Somebody, again, making fun of people who play against the computer. Oh, you beat the computer, so what? Well, if you put it up to the toughest difficulty, the computer, through cheese if no other reason, can be quite a challenge. But to your point that you brought up earlier, if you're having fun with the game, that's the whole point. If somebody who is not elite on the sticks, which is totally fine when you're playing a basketball game, you don't have to be the best player in the world if you're enjoying the game, because again, that is the point. But if you're playing on rookie or pro or whatever, and just having a blast with it, I mean, certainly it doesn't give you much bragging rights if you're blowing out the computer on rookie difficulty, but if that's what's fun for you, playing the game, that's all that matters. Who cares what other people think?
Right, stop gatekeeping people's fun.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Perfect. Yeah, perfectly well said.
People can have fun as long as they're not hurting anybody else's experiences and whatnot. Let them have at it.
Or claiming to be an elite player when you're playing on rookie against the CPU. I mean, if you're making that claim, then people might say, okay, up the difficulty a bit, sir. But no, don't gatekeep the fun. Perfectly said.
Right. So I also want to point something out. So my brother and I have been playing NBA 2K23 PC a little bit more lately. Using legends and then also like experimenting with regular teams and whatnot. And since the patches, that game has gone downhill in many ways, in our opinion. We feel like the skating is worse than it was at launch. We actually complimented the foot planning when the game first came out, but it feels like the players are sliding quite a bit more. The suction is worse by far than next gen right now, even when you put up body up sensitivity down to 0 in the sliders. The shooting has gotten worse, much like next gen. And the CPU, and this was at launch too, but it's even worse now. The CPU is not bright at all. The way they play offense and defense is on Hall of Fame, by the way. We're playing on Hall of Fame with no slider tweaks other than the body up sensitivity tweak. The way they play offense drives my brother and I nuts. We can beat them by 150, like no problem. Like they are so bad. They drive into the lane with a player who wouldn't normally even be in there that often, and they'll just throw up shots on like double teams and whatnot. They take contested shots constantly. They never hit a contested shot. It's a 100% miss when they're contested. They don't play smart at all. I complimented Next Gen's the CPU on Next Gen on the last review that we did, the last full review of NBA 2K23. I guess I didn't play the PC version enough before to realize how bad the AI is on that game. They are miserable. It is the AI is much better and much more sound on the Next Gen version.
And that's disappointing to hear, because we were quite complimentary of the PC and last gen release, because it did seem that they'd put a lot of effort into that this year. In fact, I wouldn't just say seem. It's quite obvious that they did. It wasn't an afterthought, so we were quite complimentary of that. I haven't played it recently, so that's I'll have to go back and play some myself to see this for myself, but that is quite disappointing to hear. And it's another advantage that older games have. is that they weren't receiving all these patches. Now, that did have its drawbacks in so much as there were issues that weren't fixed until the following year, if at all, but they were left in a state that was somewhat final. So there wasn't that risk of gameplay changing for the worse that has come in over the past couple of generations or so, that these patches get pushed through. I mean, it was there on the 360 and PS3 generation. NBA Live 10, as I've said before, is a great example of how the second patch did break a few things, but at the same time, that you pretty much got the game that you got. And while that, again, they did have the drawbacks of not fixing certain issues, it also didn't break things that were working. So you go back to an NBA 2K13, you go back to a College Hoops 2K7, and they're intact. But you play an NBA 2K23 or other recent releases, and they can evolve over the year for the worse after launch.
Yeah, that's why I posted a while back and years back in the forums to tell people, remind them to back up their EXE.
Yes.
Their original EXE or an EXE where they liked the gameplay. Because, what would happen is the game would get patched and then the gameplay that they enjoyed or, at least got some satisfaction out of it would be gone. And then when you put that EXE back in the folder, as long as the patch didn't have anything to do with ratings or attributes and tendencies and etc., the gameplay would at least revert back. So if shooting was messed with, right, like the mechanics of shooting, you'd put the other EXE back in and the shooting would return back to the way you liked it,
exactly.
etc.
Yeah.
So I think the patches often do hurt the games. We saw it with NBA Live 19. The best version of that game was the demo. That was the best gameplay for NBA Live 19, and then it got patched a bunch, and they hurt the shooting, and things got a little bit more canned, and there seemed to be a little bit more input lag later after the patches and everything. I don't know what they did behind the scenes, but yeah, patches can absolutely hurt a game, and I think that we've seen that time and time again.
And since we've brought up both games on this show, NBA 2K13 and College Hoops 2K7, both great releases in their own right, 2K13, I would say, is the superior release, because 2K was just going from strength to strength at that point in time. The big thing in 2K13, as I mentioned in my recent Way Back Wednesday retrospective on the game, is that it brought in right-stick dribbling. Because when we were playing College Hoops 2K7, that was fun, but I was trying to make some dribble moves, and I just couldn't with that old dribbling style in the original Isomotion. Once they brought in that right-stick dribbling and those advanced dribbling controls, 2K was just so accessible to me as a long-time NBA Live gamer to that point, and man, I just love 2K13. I can revisit that anytime. That was the year that got me into my career. I wish I played a bit more Association that year, but even so, I just going back and playing that game now, playing some exhibition games, or even dusting off that my career with the Nuggets is so much fun. Yeah,
I was trying to do dribble moves too on College Hoops 2K7, and there's just not a lot of control with the dribble, and it was doing random dribbles that I wasn't trying to do, and my offensive player had so much momentum when I tried to pull off a dribble move where it would just push me into a direction where I didn't want to be. And at one point I was just screw it, I'm not going to do dribble moves anymore. Yeah. I'm going to just, try to get open moving off the ball, or look for you moving off the ball, or attack the post and whatnot, or do a straight line drive. NBA 2K13's right stick dribbling is some of the best in 2K's history. And what's crazy is that was their first implementation of right stick dribbling. And they did such a good job with it, leaning one way and crossing over the other, where you can really break your man down and whatnot, the spin moves, going behind the back, everything that you can do in NBA 2K13 overall with the right stick feels so good.
It is a rare mechanic that is so good in its very first incarnation. I do think that Live 2003, 10 years earlier when it brought in freestyle control, that it got it right for the most part. It was very overpowering in a game that lent very arcade, obviously. But yeah, 2K13 brought in right stick dribbling, did it so well right out of the gate, and all the other mechanics of that game feel fantastic, so it just slotted in really well. I do think they made the right call bringing back that combined shot stick and dribbling stick as the pro stick in later games. It is still possible in 2K13, if you hold the modifier, you can turn that back into a shot stick. Also, there's a couple of different options in the control configuration where you can, if you don't want to use the dribbling, you can use that old school approach, the previous isomotion approach, and just use that as a shot stick as before. But yeah, I think people just took to the right stick dribbling, and I definitely think that it won over a lot of people like myself who were very loyal to Live for many years and liked that dribbling system. And it got one of the last things that NBA Live was still doing better than 2K was the dribbling controls. And once it got that, it was very hard to not pick up 2K and enjoy it.
Some of the best dribbling in the NBA 2K series, and it's a game that hardly ever gets brought up when talking about the great 2K games of the past. NBA 2K15. The dribbling in that game is absolutely stellar. Some of the best in the series. The post game also is absolutely excellent in that game. You love the 2K14 post game. 2K15 is built right off of that, maybe slightly better than 2K14 in that regard. I think NBA 2K15 is often overlooked, and I think that one of these days, when we record, we're going to have to break down NBA 2K15. Maybe we can have a couple sessions on it and whatnot, and we can really dive deep into what makes NBA 2K15 awesome.
That'll be one of the next games we cover. Yeah, for sure. I didn't play that as much because I was trying to give Live 15 a go, which I did with Ultimate Team that year, and did have a blast with that. But 2K15 is definitely the superior game, to put it mildly. So yeah, I'd love to revisit that and make that one of our future deep dives.
Yeah, so many games that we can still revisit and talk about on the podcast. That's why we're able to release every week, folks. Because Andrew and I are always playing these games, and we have such ridiculous large collections and whatnot of basketball video games. And there's just always something to cover. There's always something to talk about.
Oh, we'll absolutely continue to do that, to revisit our collections for our own enjoyment, of course, but also to create content. And to that point, Derek, as always, we throw over to our listeners to suggest games to revisit, and we'll take that deep dive.
Absolutely. And no mailbag this week, but I promise I'll put out a prompt, including a quiz, for the next episode of the NLSC podcast. And once again, I want to thank all our listeners for their continued support of our content, whether it be, the podcast, the YouTube videos, our activity on Twitter, activity on the forums, etc.
Indeed. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of the show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our aforementioned content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Absolutely. I'm most active on Twitter. You can reach me there at D43G and at D4384. I am on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC forums as a team member, D43.
I am Andrew in our forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC, of course, is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. Our Instagram is NLSC Basketball. Our aforementioned YouTube channel is youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, NBA-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.